Robert, thank you so much, man, for taking the time to sit with us.
Ricardo, thank you so much.
Appreciate it, man.
Absolutely, Coca.
It was kind of funny. Like, we stumbled last second at the Elliott event, right?
Yeah.
Last second stumbled, and you're like, "Okay, this guy's a Canadian."
Canadian accents.
Yeah.
It goes from a mile away.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you kind of want to tell us a little bit about yourself? You're Canadian too, right? So, like, I guess like where you started in Canada and then how you got out here.
Nerds.
Yeah, so Canada, great country. Great country. The problem is it's small. It's very small. You know, you got 36 million, I think, in Canada.
Yeah.
Around that.
Yeah.
Versus America, you got over 350 million people. So I knew I wanted to be in entrepreneurship. So if you look at the total addressable market in Canada versus the US is 10 times bigger market. So did my undergrad in college, and then I was just like, I got to be in the US. So I've been in the US ever since.
Yeah.
Graduated 2015, and yeah, I've been living in the US ever since.
And you went to school in the States.
Yes, I went to Harvard, but don't hold it against me.
Yeah. How was that whole experience? Like,
It was great. I mean, I got my dorm assignment. I had Mark Zuckerberg's dorm room, and that was cool. That was kind of a little bit of a mindfuck because when I got into school, my goal was to make $100K a year. I was like, man, if I could like graduate and make $100K a year, you know, I had a friend's dad. Growing up in Calgary, we lived out in Springbank, and Springbank is pretty wealthy area. It's like the most wealthy area in Calgary, but we were like the poor kids living in the nice neighborhood.
yeah.
So, you know, we had like the shack on the block. Parents weren't very wealthy at all, but I remember going to a friend's birthday party. And this guy's dad was super wealthy, like super, super wealthy. Like 6-car garage, 8,000 square foot house. He's got like multiple Ferraris, Lambos, the Rolex watches. I'm like, sir, what do you do for a living to make all this money? He's like, well, I'm an investment banker. How do I become an investment banker? He's like, well, Robert, what you got to do, get really good grades, go to college and study economics and finance, preferably Harvard, and then go work on Wall Street. I'm like, okay, cool. He said, go work on Wall Street, preferably for Goldman Sachs if you can get it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I got my 3-step plan. Let me go execute. I went fucking ham. Like, I just went after it so hard. Gone to Harvard, studied finance and economics, graduated, get an interview with the freaking vice president of Goldman Sachs. And the guy's interviewing me. He's like, Robert, I'm going to offer you the job.
Uncapped fans, want to build your business credit and unlock new financial opportunities for your company? Check out CreditLift. They offer tailored credit building plans, expert advice, and tools to help your business thrive.
As a loyal listener to our podcast, you can get started through our exclusive link below. Strengthen your business credit and take your company to the next level today.
Thanks for supporting our sponsors.
And now back to the show.
I'm like, hell yeah, like I'm going to make $100K.
Yeah, you did it.
Let's go. He's like, Robert, and now this interview, I thought it was going to be like 30 minutes or whatever. It ended up going on for like hours. It's like, Robert, I want to offer you a job, but please don't take it.
Wow.
Please don't take it? What do you mean?
Yeah.
Like, Robert, you know, our company, we spent millions of dollars trying to recruit really sharp guys like you. And he was a Harvard alumni, so like I could tell he was giving me like good advice.
Yeah.
He was giving me advice against his own interests. He's like, I would love to have a guy like you on my team. Like you would make me a ton of money. You'd be an all-star. He's like, but Robert, you're an entrepreneur. And he said, you know, coming out of Harvard, most of the class goes into consulting or finance.
Yeah.
And when we go to the 5-year anniversary, most guys go into finance, consulting, or there's another group that goes into entrepreneurship. Is like at the 5-year anniversary, the guys that go into finance and consulting, they're on top of the world. You know, they just bought their first Aston Martin. They're living in a luxury penthouse. They seem like they're on top of the world. And then you got the entrepreneurs that like have the crazy idea and they're still living at home. And at the 5-year anniversary, we're like, oh, we made the right choice. We made the right choice.
Yeah.
We're on top of the world, and they're still living in their mom's basement. But then when you go to the 10-year anniversary or the 15-year anniversary, Those guys are exiting their companies for hundreds of millions of dollars. And now we're working for them, managing their money. So he's, Robert, I'm going to offer you a job, but please don't take the job. Go and work for a small company for a few years. Pick some industry that is interesting for you, where it hasn't been disrupted by technology yet. Go and learn an industry for a few years at a small company because you'll get more responsibility, more ownership, and then go and quit and do it on your own. So I'm like, shit. There's like only a few weeks before graduation. I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? This guy is so smart and he's so far ahead of me. I should listen to his advice. So I turned down all my banking jobs. And I saw how finance had been disrupted by technology. Like back in the day, you used to be on the trading floor and there'd be like the buy sell spread.
Yeah.
They'd be like, who wants 100 shares of IBM? And they're like, oh, I'll take them,
Yeah.
The buy sell spread used to be dollars because it's a very inefficient market. And then technology came in, you start getting algorithmic trading, and that industry became way more efficient as a result of technology coming in. And I was trying to think of another industry that was not yet disrupted by technology. And of course, real estate. I mean, real estate is the biggest market, there's trillions of dollars of real estate in the world. People spend most of their income on real estate. So it's like real estate is interesting because there's so much money in it. It hasn't been disrupted by technology. Let me get into that. So I just started cold calling house flippers, pitching them. And then this one guy, Brad Chandler, offered me a job. And instead of making $150K a year, I took a job for $55K a year, massive cut. And I told him coming in, I said, look, I'm going to work for you for 3 years, make you as much money as I can. You teach me the business. After 3 years, I'm going to quit and do it on my own. So that's how I got started.
Yeah. And why do you think he gave you that advice? Like, why you? Why do you say, okay, Robert, don't take the job? Like, what was it about that conversation?
Well, finance is a soul-sucking job, right? It's a very soul-sucking job, and you don't have a lot of freedom. You don't have a lot of flexibility. You're stuck on the hamster wheel, right? And yeah, you can make millions of dollars, but I had started a bunch of like small. They weren't really businesses. They were more like hustles, right? Like I had an events company at Harvard where we're doing events, basically throwing parties. I had a photography, videography business, a clothing import business. I was also flipping websites. So I'd buy a website that was like cash flowing. I would like revamp the marketing, revamp the landing page, throw traffic at it, do all these like little hacks, like drive more traffic to the page for free. You like post about it on Reddit, pretending like,
it's a ghost account, right?
Like, oh, if you guys are looking for a solution for this, I just bought this product, blah, 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 and get all this free traffic. And then I'd flip those websites. So that's how I paid for a lot of my tuition. So I think he recognized in me that like I had what it took to like actually succeed, maybe at a bigger scale in entrepreneurship. And if you do have that, it's very rare. Not everyone has that, but if you do have that, you can make way more money as an entrepreneur than you ever could in finance.
Do you still have a relationship with this person that gave you this amazing?
Yeah. So the funny story is the end of that story is he said, Robert, go start your own company. And then when you sell it, call me up and let me manage your money.
Really?
So this story comes full circle because about 18 months ago, I got the first like what I would consider like a serious offer on one of my companies. It was for $150 million. A lot of money. And so I thought about it for about 30 seconds and I was like, no, I'm not going to take the offer.
It's a tough choice.
Yeah.
Why not? Like it's $150 million. Why? Like, you never spend this money ever in your life. If you spent millions of dollars a year, you'll never spend it. You can just live off the interest. You could be making $15 million a year just on interest. But I think when it comes to deciding when to sell a company, I actually asked Patrick David about this yesterday. I asked Patrick. We were just at an event with Patrick David yesterday. And I asked him, I'm like, how did you make your decision to sell? And he said, well, it's very simple. You got to set your number. And once you hit your number, that's when you exit. But I won't say what my number is, but I hadn't hit my number yet. And we were growing at like 16% a month. Like you don't sell when you're growing at 16% a month because you're doubling time on your business. I think the doubling time is like I don't know, it's like 8 months or something, or you'll be double the revenue. So he's like, yeah, I set my number 250 million. I'm like, how'd you come up with that? He's like, well, the last guy that had sold a company was 240 million. So I wanted to set the new record. I had to see it. So that's what he came up with. And he's like, once I got my 250 offer, I took it and I walked. So I have my number. I set my number. When I get my number, then I'll exit. But after I got that call, I was like, okay, I should probably start looking at tax strategies and stuff. So I called up the same guy that interviewed me. He was literally my first phone call right after. And I didn't think he was even going to remember me. He's like, yeah, of course I remember you. And I was like, yeah. So I just got offered 150 million. What do you think I should do? Like, well, he's like, well, we got to start putting your like tax strategy and everything together. And now he's my banker. Patrick Bet-David was talking about how there's only 400 Goldman Sachs private bankers in the world. So I have one of those 400.
Yeah.
He's a gangster. His dad used to be Secretary of State under Ronald Reagan, like really great banker. So yeah, now he manages my money.
Yeah, that's crazy. And like, what were your family and friends thinking when you declined that, like, 100,000 to 50,000 a year? Like, did you have the support, the full support? Or?
Everyone thought I was nuts. Can you imagine that? Like, my parents are like, "You're the first one in our family to graduate from Harvard. You're throwing your whole future away. How many Harvard kids are working at this company? I bet not too many." And I'm like, just trust me. I'm looking at a longer term plan. I'm not looking at next year. I'm looking at 10 years, 20 years. Like, Jeff Bezos talks about this regret minimization framework. So regret minimization framework, it's a mental model for thinking about decisions. What you should do is ask yourself, if I don't do this, even if it's very high risk, if I don't do this, will I regret it later? When you're 100 years old, are you going to, like, even if I failed, I would have at least been like, okay, at least I took my shot. So when you're young, you can take a lot more risks. So I was like, I'm young, I'm broke anyways. Like, if it doesn't work out, I'd just go down to zero anyways. So I always go back to school, do another degree. Like, I think when you're young, you got to just try as many things as you can. Take big risks in your 20s. I say live in your 20s like no one else. Well, like in my 20s, I went 60 hours a day, 7 days a week. Live your 20s like no one else well, so that for the rest of your life, you can live like no one else can.
You have this really like strong hustle within you. Where did that really come from?
So I grew up with 7 kids in my family. So my parents weren't wealthy, so it was like survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
They weren't buying us clothes. Like, I wasn't the hand-me-downs. It was the Salvation Army hand-me-downs. And like, if you want to have lunch, you got to go figure out some way to come up with some hustle to go buy your own lunch. So I was always hustling. Like, even when I was 12, 13 years old, I started my first businesses, like selling coffee door to door and mowing lawns, selling candy at school, just like doing whatever I need to do to make money. And then I think when you start doing that at a young age, it just becomes a part of you, and you just start doing it bigger when you get older.
So you worked with that company, getting paid $50,000 a year for 3 years, right?
I jacked up my salary pretty quick.
Yeah, for sure.
By the way, here's a tip. So what I did, I knew I was taking a big pay cut. I'm like, by the way, I'm turning down 6 figures at Goldman Sachs to take this job. This is way less than I could. You can't even. It was in Washington D.C. You can't even live in Washington D.C. for that much. So I told the CEO, I said, "Look, what KPIs are the most important for your business? Like this one, this one, this one." I'm like, if I could, how much would you think realistically we could increase those KPIs over the next 6 months? She's like, well, if we could get them to this, that would be incredible. I'm like, how much is that worth to the business? Oh, it's worth like this many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. I'm like, okay, if I help you hit those, here's how much I want you to bonus me. And what I want to do is I want us to put on the calendar a meeting 6 months from now to go over these KPIs. If I hit them, or if I hit these certain whatever milestones, here's how much I get in bonuses. And I want to renegotiate my comp plan in 6 months. So I did that every 6 months for 3 years. I would renegotiate my comp plan every six months based on the KPIs I hit. So I increased my salary pretty significantly and took that company from the verge of bankruptcy to over $1 million a month.
That's insane. I remember earlier you had told us like you went from literally 3 years ago having a negative bank account to where you're at now.
Yeah. So I did 3 years at Express Home Buyers, and helped that business really transform, become like data driven, tech driven, and become one of the strongest companies in our industry. And then I quit that job at 3 years. I'm like, okay, I did my 3 years. Time for me to go do it on my own. And then I started up my own real estate wholesaling business, and I started building technology for myself, for my business, to help run my business more efficiently. And of course, people had seen the success I'd had working on Brad's team, and I started getting calls all the time. Hey, can you do some consulting for me? I'm like, sorry, like I'm trying to focus on my own thing. I really believe focus is the most important thing in business. So I kept on turning people down, but I would get calls all the time. Hey, I'll give you 20 grand if you just come in and like spend a weekend with me, whatever. But eventually, I realized how expensive it was to do software development, and I had this big list of guys that wanted me to help them. So I called them all up and I'm like, look, I'm building all this state-of-the-art tech for my company. If you guys just chip in money every month, all the tech that I built for my company, I'll also give to you. So my main company, InvestorLift, initially it was a product built just for me. I wanted to become the first $100 million year real estate wholesaler in America. And to do that, I knew I needed the best tech. So I was just rolling all my cash into tech. And then I convinced these 12 guys to chip in some money. And the 12 of us became pretty big wholesalers. But I was rolling so much money into tech that there wasn't very much left over. Okay, I was just going all in on this tech play. And I also wanted to become a millionaire before I was 30. Okay. And I was sitting there like a couple weeks before my 30th birthday, and I had $30,000 of bills to pay by the end of the month and negative $5,000 in the bank account.
Wow.
I'm like, shit, like I'm in trouble. I'm going to miss my window here to become a millionaire before 30. And then my dad calls me up and he's like, hey, you should call your brother-in-law and congratulate him. I'm like, congratulate him for what? So my brother-in-law, he also has a tech company. He's like, oh, he just became a billionaire today. I'm like, what? So my brother-in-law had just become a billionaire. He's a few years, he's probably 10 years older than me. And I'm sitting there trying to just get my first million. I'm like, I'm doing something wrong. So I call him up and like get some advice from him. And I called up a couple other guys that I do that had net worths of over 100 million. I had 3 pivotal conversations that helped me completely rethink what I was doing. I was trying to build a real estate business. The tech was just kind of a side piece. And had these 3 key conversations and came up with a strategy to take InvestorLift that I was kind of holding on to just for me and my 12 guys and bring it out mass market is a SaaS product. But it wasn't a SaaS product at the time. It was like we would literally install it on people's servers. So to turn it into a SaaS product would take at least 60 days to do. It would require us hiring more engineers that I didn't have money for. So I'm like, like conversation I had with one of these guys, he's like, why don't you take this mass market? I'm like, well, I need time and I need money. Well, why don't you have money? Oh, I don't have money because I don't have it as a SaaS product. And he's like, well, just do a pre-sale. So what I did is I hosted a webinar and I'm like, hey, here's some case studies of what me and these other 12 companies have been able to achieve with the software. And we're doing numbers like no one had seen before. And I'm like, if you want to buy it, it's going to be available 60 days from now, but you can pre-purchase it now for half off.
Okay.
And my thought was, if no one buys it, whatever, kill the idea, just keep on doing what I'm doing. If a few people buy it, but it's not enough to really make sense for us, I'll just refund them their money and just keep on doing what I'm doing. Or if a lot of people buy it, then I use the money from that to go hire the engineers I need, turn it into a SaaS product, and launch it. So I jumped on the webinar. We had 150 people registered. In the first hour, we sold 144,000 on the pre-sale. And I was like, shit, like I'm sitting there on my phone, it bings every time we get a sale. And like, towards the end of the webinar, I was like, bing, 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 bing. And every time it's binging, that's like another $3,000. Like, bing, bing, bing. I'm like, whoa. I knew people needed this. I didn't realize how much people needed it. Like, it was really a big void in the market. Then I took that webinar. I was like, let me see what happens if I spread this webinar around a little bit. So I shared it on a bunch of real estate investing Facebook groups, and it just goes viral. It just completely goes viral. My phone is ringing off the fucking hook. All these people want to buy it. In the first 30 days, we did 1.8 million in pre-sales.
Wow.
And then I made the strategic decision to actually shut off sales, completely shut off sales. So, so we did 1.8 million in pre-sales, but then I was like, okay, this is going to be all about reputation. So I made the decision to actually shut off sales, which is really tough.
Yeah.
Because we're doing like hundreds of thousands.
Is that to make it more rare?
Well, no, because what I was thinking is I don't have a company. It was just me and my co-founder. We didn't have customer support. We didn't have account managers. I'm like, I need to build a team. If we go onboard thousands of clients and we don't have the fulfillment, people are going to have a bad experience. And if we have a reputation, is everything in business. If people have a bad experience and we don't deliver, then we're dead in the market. We're completely dead. So I'm like, we already have too many signups. Let's cut it off. So I kept sales turned off for about 8 months.
Wow.
Which actually made our product even more viral, because when people couldn't buy it, it became even more exclusive and automatically shot up our brand value, where we're now like the Rolex of our industry for software. We're the most expensive software by multiples. Like, the most expensive software you could buy at the time was like $500 a month. And our average ticket price on InvestorLift was $33,000.
Wow. Yeah, wow.
Way more expensive. But because people couldn't buy it, they wanted even more. And then I personally onboarded every single client and trained them. So me and my co-founder, we flew down to Mexico, rented a villa in Tulum, and just went 16 hours a day for 2 months working on the software and then onboarding every single person. Like, me as a CEO, I onboarded and trained every single one of those initial customers, and then did all account management on them, making sure that they were all successful in that first year. And then at the end of that first year, then I opened up sales again. But then we had like such a good reputation that it just took off from there.
And you mentioned SaaS product. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. So software as a service. So, when you buy like Salesforce or like CRM or whatever, you're buying the product. It used to be before SaaS, you'd buy software, you just owned it. And then we come up with a new version, you buy that new version. Now we've transitioned more to software as a service, where you just pay a monthly fee, and every time there's new updates, new features, you just automatically get those. How
big was AI for your company?
So AI, the way that we look at AI, like, we're doing some stuff that could be considered AI right now. We're doing more and more and more. Like, I just hired a math professor and AI guy to really drive that a lot more in our company. But I'm more in like the Apple camp, where like Apple, like they've been using AI for years in their phones, but they don't call it AI, because at the end of the day, the customer doesn't really care. If you see the companies are like, we have AI. Usually they don't even really have AI.
Yeah.
I just we do like some AI type stuff in the back end, but we don't explain that it's AI. We're just like, hey, here's what this feature can do for you.
Yeah.
People don't really care like how it works. They're just like, what can this do for you?
Were you able to decide a ticket price when you were like developing this product?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So whenever you bring something to market, there's something called a price elasticity curve. Okay, so I always say that I don't really use much of what I learned at Harvard, but this is one thing I did learn at Harvard that I there is certain things I learned that are useful. So price elasticity curve. So price elasticity is how much does a product's price impact sales. Okay, so for example, gasoline prices are very non-elastic, meaning if you increase the gas prices a lot, yeah, there's some people, like poor people, they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to like cut back on my mileage because gas prices are high. But in general, people still need to drive to work. They still need to drive through the grocery store. They still consume about the same amount of gas. So gas prices are very non-elastic. Even when you double the prices, you don't get half the usage. You get nearly the same usage. Software prices tend to be more elastic. So the way that you got to test this is you got to actually experiment with different price points and see what the conversion rate is at different price points. And then you can actually graph that on a curve and mathematically figure out exactly what the optimum price point is for your product. So the way to do this is you always start with a high price point. So let's say I was bringing your product to market, you charge $500 a month, but then what you would do is like a third of your traffic, you then show a coupon code saying like, $200 off, and then you do it, or $100 off, and then you do another pop up to another third of your traffic that says $200 off, and then you see what the conversion rates are at those different price points, and then you can graph that out and mathematically figure out exactly where your price point should be.
So you're building InvestorLift. Like, how do you know when it's time to bring on like to build it even bigger? For example, we spoke to Scotty T the other day, right? So how do you know it's time? Okay, I need a credit product now. I need this now.
Yeah, good question. So a lot of people think that InvestorLift is a software company. It is a software company, but incognito, I'm actually building the biggest lending company in the country, because the software money it just rolls all back in to fund future development of the product and grab more market share. Because in tech, it's winner take all, right? There's one Facebook, there's one Google, right? It's winner take all. So you have to grab the market as fast as you can. And then you have to keep those networking effects going and protect your market share. So far the focus has been on grabbing the entire real estate investing market. So 80 to 90% of all homes in America are sold every year with a realtor. That is what makes sense for most people. But 10 to 20% of homes, they're like really worn down. They don't sell with real estate agents, like the hoarder houses and stuff. You can't sell that shit on Zillow with a realtor.
Yeah.
So that's what we sell. I always joke we're Zillow for trap houses.
Yeah.
So you can buy a $500,000 house for $250,000 off of InvestorLift.com. Now it's going to need $50,000 of work, but then you're into it for like $300,000, and you walk in with a couple $100,000 of equity right away. So I wanted to own that piece, own that market share. So now we've got the dominant position there. We do have knockoffs that pop up all the time, but usually don't last very long. We had one guy, he raised $196 million to try to copy us. He had 600 employees this time last year. Now he's down to 3.
Oh, wow.
So the software, I'm rolling it all back in. And the big play, because I can make tens of millions of dollars on the software, but I can make hundreds of millions of dollars off the lending. So we're getting our lending companies set up. And then there's all these ancillary services that will allow us to make a piece of revenue off of each deal that's sold. Because we're selling over $1 billion of houses per month. It's a lot of houses. I can make way more money doing the loans and doing the title work and the title insurance and lead gen and all of that than I ever could make off the software. The first guy that ever looked at investing in InvestorLift, his name was Paul Bucknight. Do you know Gmail? Of course you get.
Yeah.
He created Gmail.
Oh, wow.
First employees at Google, created Gmail. He came up with Google's slogan, "Don't be evil."
Yeah.
Also was the guy that invented Facebook newsfeed. After Google, he switched over, was one of the first employees at Facebook as well. So he's worth over like $2 billion. So he flew my co-founder and I out to San Francisco to meet with him and look at InvestorLift. And he's like, first of all, goddamn impressed by what you guys were able to achieve here with no venture capital backing. This is very impressive. He's like, but you guys are being idiots. I'm like, why? He's like, give out the software for free, grab the entire market, and then make your money on the lending and ancillary services. I'm like, I know that, but I also got to pay my rent.
Yeah.
Right? So give me some VC funding, and I can go that route right now. He's like, call me back once you're ready to do that. I'm like, fuck you. But we've now gotten to the point where it's time to go add all these ancillary services. So we're spinning up LendLift, which is our lending product. We've done some tests with a few $1 million of loans there. TitleLift is coming later this year. We'll be doing all the title and transaction coordination. So that'll allow us to make a couple grand off of each property that's sold, and it'll all be built in, so it's a better user experience. We got CreditLift because what we found on lending is because a lot of the loans right now are being securitized and sold to Wall Street, they need a certain credit score. They need a 680 credit score. in like 90% of the applications, people didn't have a 680 credit score. So 90% of the leads, we just couldn't lend on them. So Scotty, my good friend, he ran a big credit repair company. And I'm like, can I just buy a piece of your company? So I bought a piece of his company. We rebranded that, relaunched it as CreditLift a couple of weeks ago. Now when someone gets denied for a loan application because the credit score is too low, we'd be like, hey, bad news is we can't lend to you now. Good news is we have this other product. You can buy this product, and 60 days from now, we should have you above 680, and then we can approve you for lending. So all the different companies are all going to be built into this one ecosystem. Kind of like, Apple has the iPhone, the iPad, the iMac, the AirPods. We'll have all these different child companies under the InvestorLift holding company that provide everything that someone needs to do a real estate transaction A to Z.
What do you look for in a finder before you acquire a company? Like, what is it about Scotty T that made you trust him?
Yeah, well, I've known him for years, right? I've known him for years, and I was a customer of his, and he saved me. He does travel hacking, which was really important for me. I was spending over $500,000 on travel. And then after I started working with him, I'm now able to get all my travel for free. So he's saved me over $500,000 a year just doing all my travel bookings with me and coming up with my strategy on which cards to use. And I don't even have to think about it. So I was a good customer of his. He did good results for me. I was like, if I'm going to get into credit, like this is the guy I'm going to do it with.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how you're taking on like all aspects of real estate, you know what I mean? And attacking them like full tilt. Yeah. Like that's super impressive. And that's super like, I don't know, it takes like a monster to think like that, because I feel like, a lot of people are sitting and hearing these numbers and they're like, okay, I'm successful. I can sit down and relax. Like what keeps you hungry after building these companies? Like, is it like a game for you? Is it fun? Is it competitive?
Yeah. I mean, now I'm at the point where like I have enough money that like I'm good. Like I'm never going to be poor.
Yeah.
So now it's more like the sport of it.
Yeah.
So with these ancillary companies, like I'm putting in top CEOs that are just guys I really like working with. We spend most of our time in life working, right? So one of the biggest perks of having your own company is you can choose who you put on your team, right? So like I have no assholes on my team, no assholes, only top performers, only like the best in the world. And with these ancillary companies, I'm like, I could just work with my other friends that are like the most gangster entrepreneurs I know. And it's fun. Like I don't work a single day in my life, right? Because I love what I do. If you want to become the best in the world at something, you got to love it, right? If there's one piece of advice I could give people, our whole culture is built around something called 11 out of 10. Okay. So when you're in school and you take a math test and you get 90% of the answers right, your teacher's like, high five, good job, you got an A, right? You go home, hey mom, look at my math test, I got an A, right? In business, when you go and you start your first company, most guys, we've been conditioned our whole lives to think 90% is good enough. Yeah. But the market does not give a fuck. The market gives zero fuck about you. So when you go to market and you go 9 out of 10 on something, you're competing against other guys that are going 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
And when you're a 9 out of 10 and someone else is going 10 out of 10, it will fuck you up. The market's always going to go for the guy that's 10 out of 10. So most guys, they get kicked in the teeth their first business because they've been conditioned their whole life thinking that 90% is good enough, and it's not. So some guys learn that the painful way. They're out of business within 6 to 18 months. And some guys learn that lesson, and then they come back, and then the next time they're like, I'm going to go 10 out of 10. I'm going to look at what the best companies in the world in my industry are doing, and I'm going to go make sure that our product or whatever is just as good as all the best companies in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you do that, then you will become a millionaire. Okay. You will become a millionaire. But then there's another level. And the next level is the level that guys like, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and guys like that have figured out. And that's finding that extra gear and going to 11 out of 10. Now, when you go from 10 to 11, and going 11 is not just looking at what the best people are doing in the world. It's going and looking at what the best people in the world are doing, but then innovating and going a level above where you definitively are the best in the world at that one thing that you do. And when you definitively are the best person on planet Earth at that one thing, the entire market comes to you. You don't have to do marketing. Like I've done almost zero marketing on InvestorLift.
Yeah.
Right? Like we just started doing that. As I always say, paid advertising is the cost of not having a good product. Because you're the best in the world, then your customers become your sales team and sell the product for you.
100%.
Yeah. So you got to go 11 out of 10 on everything. Go 11 out of 10 on everything. That's really the secret. Go extreme focus. There's a kid at the event yesterday, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I want to ask you for some advice." I'm like, "All right." He's like, "Yeah, I want to create mentorship for leadership. Like I want to create my own like education training program on teaching leadership." I'm like, "Okay, well, how old are you?" He's like, "I'm 24." I'm like, "Have you led anything?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Well, I was in the Marines for a couple of years." I'm like, "Yeah, so we're like a million other people." I'm like, "It's not going to work. Why would I come to a 24-year-old to learn leadership that has never led a company before?"
100%.
I'm like, "Go build a company first, build that up to 100 employees, lead 100 employees, sell the company. Then there's no shortcuts.
Yeah.
And then go and create a course on leadership." If you create a course on leadership now at 24 years old, trying to teach CEOs and executives leadership, no one's going to buy it. First of all, you're competing against Tony Robbins and Andy Elliott's and guys like that. I'm like, this is not going to work in market. I'm like, the only thing you could do right now is you do have this military background. I'm like, you got to niche down. When I first created my product, there was maybe like 100 companies in the world that met the criteria of what I was going after. I was going for real estate wholesaling companies in the United States that were making over $250,000 a month. That was the only people I sold to. That was it. It was super micro niche. Just building a product to make 100 customers absolutely love it. That's what you got to do. I was like, let's say you're running a pet business and you want to get into the product space. Well, find some tiny niche, like gluten-free dog food that's 100% organic, vegan, whatever.
Yeah.
Like become the best in the world at that one thing and like go have the best products in the world for that one thing. Like find a micro niche, because the smaller you go, the faster you can go to 11 out of 10 and be the best in the world at that one thing. And then with social media now, you can go and have a target market of the entire world and then go find those people that are interested in that one small thing, build a community around it, and have the best products in the world for that one niche. And then you can start branching out and capturing more market and branching out. But if you guys are watching this and you want to be successful, niche down. The smaller you go, the more successful you're going to be.
Yeah. And I know I saw on your Instagram that Richard Branson gave you some advice, right? And one of the pieces of advice was have a crystal clear goal. What is your crystal clear goal with everything that you're building?
I am going to rebuild the world one house at a time.
Wow.
So if you look at America's neighborhoods, we'll start with America first. Every house in America, there's 150 million houses, 110 million houses, something like that. They're all falling apart, right? Like every day when it rains, the sun beats down them, all these houses are falling apart. And when you get a house that falls apart on one street, it devalues that one street.
Yeah.
But then you get a couple more, all of a sudden that street dies. And then you have a few streets die in one neighborhood, all of a sudden that neighborhood dies. And then you get the crime comes in, the drugs come in neighborhoods starts with a house, then goes to a street, then goes to a neighborhood, then goes to a community, then goes to an entire city. And there's entire cities now that are falling apart. And when real estate investors like us come in and infuse capital into those houses to bring them back up to the standards and bring them back to life, you're not just bringing that house back to life. You're creating hundreds of jobs because there's hundreds of different people that are involved in each real estate transaction. The insurance companies, the contractors, the title agents, the window vendors, the roofing vendors, the flooring companies. So you're creating a lot of jobs, but you're bringing that house back to life.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do bring enough houses back to life, like here in Phoenix, it's cool. If we drive anywhere around here, you can't drive more than 5 minutes without driving past a house that was sold on InvestorLift
Wow.
and brought back to life.
Yeah.
And that's across every major city in America. So I always tell my team, I'm like, the work that we do has massive impact. We're literally infusing billions of dollars back into these neighborhoods, bringing them back to life, and rebuilding America's neighborhoods one house at a time.
Yeah. And I know you're Canadian. Do you ever think to bring this to Canada?
We will bring it to Canada.
Yeah.
Yep. And then eventually we could bring it to the rest of the world as well. But you got to stay focused first. I'm like, let's really, really own the United States first. And then we'll tack on, Canada and expand out. We get requests all the time for us to bring it to Europe.
Yep. Do you find just with how you live your life and like always being busy, does it have an effect on your health and like even just like your daily life?
I did my blood. That's a good question because I just got my blood test results back and some of my blood levels were off. I've always had perfect blood levels because I was an athlete for a long time. Ran track. I still have I'm pretty sure I still have the Alberta records for 1,500 and 3,000.
Wow. Let's go.
So I was pretty heavy in athletics for a while. Last year was pretty tough. Because interest rates went up and like a lot of guys got really hit. Like a lot of companies were down like 50, 60%. We still grew, but we grew a lot less than in the previous years. Now this year we're taking off again. So I probably pushed it a little bit too much last year. So I have like high cholesterol and like high sodium and like a few things. But I actually just hired this company where they create a whole training program for you, diet program, all of that. You wear the Whoop bands and then it feeds into this team. I got like 6 doctors now that are like monitoring all my blood levels, my performance stats, all of that. And then setting up my meal plan and setting up my training schedule and everything to go optimize my performance. Because now this year we're going from 1 company to 6 different companies. It's a lot, right? So I think you have to stay sharp because your body and your mind are so connected. So now this year, that's like a super high priority for me is like, I'm getting jacked this year. You see the gym downstairs?
Yeah, it's amazing.
I'm like, you can't live in a building with a gym like that and not get jacked. So I used to be jacked. Like I was coming out of college. I was like now I'm like 190 pounds. I was like 220, like cut.
Just yoked
as hell. I was in the gym like 5 days a week. So I gotta get back to that. And then I did the stem cell treatment yesterday.
Wow, that's awesome.
I'm feeling really good today. So
did something.
It did something. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna do more stuff like that to like try to boost my performance.
Yeah. And I know you just recently got engaged. Congratulations. How important is it to have a woman in your life that supports you?
So I think it's the ultimate productivity hack. Okay. Because it depends who you're with, right? Like I am a more traditional guy where I'm like, I'll go out and kill it and you go and manage everything else. So my fiance manages the house, the cars, if we need to schedule cleaners, like she handles all of that. I don't need to worry about like the fridge being empty. She handles all of that. Even like our social schedule, like who we're going out to dinners with. When there's a big life event, she will like send people stuff in the mail. You like send them flowers in the mail or a gift or whatever. So she manages everything outside the business, so I don't have to think about it. And when you don't have to think about doing your freaking laundry and managing your house and making your car payments or insurance payments or tax payments or whatever, that really helps elevate you as an entrepreneur. We got our first son on the way.
Congratulations. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's probably going to add another fuel to you, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Now I got even more motivation. Everything that we earn, everything that anyone earns is going to be given away, right? Because you're going to die. And it's either going to be given to the next generation or given to the government. Like we only just borrow stuff for a little bit and then we get reset when you die. The only thing that outlives us is our kids. Right. So I was telling her, I'm like, she's Norwegian. The Norwegian culture, they're really pro like women in the workplace, equality, like all this shit. So, some of her friends are giving her flack that she's going to be like a stay-at-home mom. And I'm like, don't listen to those people. Like, your job is way more important than my job. Like my business, when I'm done, all the money I make is just going to be given away or passed on. Like it's going to get zeroed out. No one's going to remember any of us. No one gives a fuck. No one's going to remember us 3 generations from now. No one will even remember our names, right? The only thing that's going to outlive us is our kids, our grandkids, or great grandkids. So raising your children, I think, is actually the most important thing you can do. And it actually blows my mind that people leave other people to raise their kids so that they can go work. I'm like, where's your priorities? Like your priority is money over your kids. Like, yeah. So I think prioritizing family is really important. I think the traditional gender roles just work out better. I know that's controversial. It might not be for everyone. If it's not for everyone, like that's fine. Like everyone should do what they want to do. But for me, I like just, I'll go out there and kill it. You manage everything else. And let's try to have the best, smartest kids ever.
Do you ever feel that you're gonna like get rid of everything once you're wealthy enough and kind of just take care of the family and kind of live that life?
Yeah, well, I'm super ADD though. So I think once I sell the first company, I'll probably take a break for a couple of years because starting a company does take years off your life. Like entrepreneurs do live a lot. Like we live less long than non-entrepreneurs, right? Because it's a lot of pressure. But I think after I sell the first one, then my goal will be like all the guys that are on the team, I'll then help them start their companies, and just work more as like an investor and advisor on other businesses and help them grow their businesses. And just try to do more high leverage work where, I'm working a couple hours a day, but it's just high leverage. And I'll have much more leverage because I'll have more capital, right? So when you have capital, you can you can say something and it happens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to transition more to that.
What would you say is your why?
My why? Curiosity. I'm just a very curious guy. And a lot of this stuff that we do, a lot of like the biggest things that we've rolled out, it's not because we're trying to make a bunch of money. It's because we're just like, oh, let's see what happens if we do this. And we test something and all of a sudden it works. And we're like, oh, wow. And also that makes the whole world a better place. Yeah, I'm more like the Elon Musk kind of camp where like you should just be intellectually curious and just try to discover more about the world. See, a lot of people when they start their companies, they make this fundamental mistake. There's another kid I was talking to yesterday. I'm like, so what do you want to do? He says, I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. I'm like, I had the exact same goal as you. I want to become a millionaire by 30. I did hit it literally a few days before I turned 30.
Crazy.
I refreshed my bank account and I see 2 commas. I'm like, wow, just made it.
Wow.
Just made it with like a few hours to spare. But I would have hit it a lot sooner, a lot quicker if I had changed my goal. See, my goal was to make $1 million. If your goal is to make $1 million, it's going to be really difficult. What you got to do instead is become the person, focus on becoming the person that makes $1 million, right? Like, I met my fiance. I told her, I'm a billionaire. I just don't have my money yet, right? So now I'm, north of 100 million. What I'm now trying to work on is adopting the mental models to become a billionaire. Okay, so let me explain this. Here's a good analogy. If you take someone that wins the lottery, okay, let's say someone wins the lottery and they win $100 million. Okay, you give them $100 million. You don't talk to them for 5 years. You check back on them in 5 years. How much money do they have left?
Usually none, right?
Yeah, it's like 99.5% of all lottery winners are bankrupt, declare bankruptcy within 5 years. They'll spend it all. Why? Because they don't have the mental models to be able to handle that much money. Okay? So they're going to spend it and they're going to zero themselves out. Now, conversely, you take a billionaire, you zero him out, throw him out on the streets with nothing, you come back 5 years later, what's going to happen?
They'll become it again.
He's going to come back with vengeance. He's going to be even richer than he ever was before. He'll probably be worth over $1 billion 5 years later, right? Because he has the mental models of a billionaire. So one of the things I like doing that, I also recommend everyone else watching this does, just read books written by billionaires. Like a lot of us spend tens of thousands of dollars trying to get coaches or whatever. That's great. You should do that. But you don't need to spend tens of thousands of dollars with a coach. What you can do instead is go on Audible and spend $7 and get 8 hours of coaching, of the best coaching from a billionaire for $7. It's the highest return on investment activity you can do, is just go find all the books written by billionaires or about billionaires. I like to have the ones written by them if I can. Like Richard Branson has a lot of really great books because it's their voice. It's not some author's voice. But I try to consume as much as I can and listen to interviews that I do. Like every time Elon Musk does a big interview, I listen to it, right? Because what I'm trying to do is download their mental models. Because if I can download their mental models, your brain is like a computer. Everything that you're ingesting every day is programming your brain. So if you can just adopt the mental models that a billionaire operates with, you will become a billionaire. That's it. That's the secret. Like, that's the secret. Andy Elliott yesterday was talking about this, right? He's like, upgrading your mental models, raising your standards. You'll hear the same message from everyone because we've all figured that out. Don't go after the money. Go after the operating system. Okay. And then the formula to making money is not trying to make money. It's creating value, right? The formula for building wealth is how much value do you create multiplied by your capture rate on the value creation, right? So if I create $1 million of value for my customers, and then I am able to charge 10% of that, so they get 10x return on investment, that's pretty good for them. It's a good deal for me. I got a 10% capture rate multiplied by the number of people that you create that value for. So you could go B2B, right? Business to business, and come up with something that's very high price point. That's kind of what I did. I do a high price point product. And then if you don't have a lot of competition, you can have a high capture rate. Your capture rate is a function of how much competition you have competing against you. If you have tons of competition, you're going to have a lower capture rate. If you have no competition, you can have a higher capture rate. Okay. And then multiplied by the number of customers I have. And because I'm B2B, I'm more niche. I have high value creation, high capture rate for a small number of customers. But you could also do, a lower value creation with a lower capture rate, but with a ton of customers, like Google or Facebook. Their earnings per customer might be a few dollars per year, but they got billions of them.
Yeah.
Right. But if people are starting business, I always recommend, by the way, do B2B first. It's way easier. B2C, you need to raise capital to do B2C. And if you raise capital, that opens up a bunch of cans of worms. But yeah, that's the formula for making money. So don't focus on trying to make money. Focus on trying to create value. The more value you create, the better off you're going to be.
How do you go about testing a product, and like when you know when it's time to let go?
This is a good question. So most people make this mistake when they're starting off a company. They come up with an idea, and then they go to their friends and their family and they say, what do you think of my idea? And of course, their friends and their family, their job is to support them. So they have bias in responses. Your friends and family are always going to support any ideas you have. Okay. Unless you have real friends that are actual entrepreneurs, then like when people come to me and they have an idea, it's a shit idea, I'll be like, it's a shit idea, here's why. But most people are just going to be supportive. Like, again, I was talking to another kid yesterday and he's like, yeah, but my girlfriend loves the idea. I'm like, dude, that is not representative of the market. She's your girlfriend. Her job is to support everything you do. You guys watch Shark Tank or Dragon's Den in Canada?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, like you see Kevin O'Leary's, these guys come up with these stupid ideas and then they're like, he'll ask, how did you fund this? He'll be like, oh, my parents mortgaged their house. He'll be like, no. So you can't test a product by asking your friends and family what they think. The only thing you can do is bring it to market and test it with the market, because the market doesn't give a fuck about you, right? So one of the things I always encourage people to do, I used to do this when I was flipping websites, is before I even bought the website, I would spin up a new landing page for the product, drive some traffic to it, and at the checkout, after you put in all your info, it'd be like, sorry, we're sold out. But then I would know kind of what it would cost me to acquire a customer and how much money I can make off that customer. The only two numbers that matter in like digital marketing is, and actually in really almost any business, is what is your customer acquisition cost then what is the lifetime value of a customer? I know that every customer that I sell a product to, I make $1,000. I know I can acquire that customer for $100. I know every dollar I plug into marketing, I'm going to make 10x that. Now I have an infinite scaling money machine. Even if it costs me $999 to acquire that customer, if I'm making $1,000, I still have an infinite money machine. It just moves a little bit slower. So you got to figure out, number one, are people actually going to buy this shit? Number two, was your customer acquisition cost and what's going to be lifetime value of your customer? The great thing is you figure out all this shit before you ever build something. So most people make the mistake where they ask their friends and family, do you think this is a good idea? They say yes. Then they'll go take $25,000, $50,000 checks from all their family and friends to go like get the product built. Then they'll go to a venture capitalist and be like, oh, I built this. I just need to raise some money to like go bring it to market. They'll raise a few $1 million, sell half their fucking company, bring it to market, and the market completely rejects it, and then they're bankrupt within 2 years. This is like 99% of all startups operate that way. The smart guys, the guys that actually make $1 billion companies, they do it in reverse. So you come up with the idea, create a landing page or whatever to pre-test it and see if people will actually buy it. And if people actually do buy it, and you've de-risked it by testing it in market, then you know it's going to be successful before you ever build it. Then you take the money, and then, or you can do pre-sales to like pre-fund it. Now, pre-sales are dangerous. You can only ever do pre-sales if you know you can deliver. Because if you do pre-sales on something and you can't deliver, you're cooked. You're going to end up like Theranos chick, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, always test stuff first. Test stuff first. We do this all the time. There's been so many products that we're like, hey, we're going to test this new product. Before we ever build it, we'll introduce it to some customers. We'll say, hey, do you want to pre-order this? And if we're swiping a bunch of credit cards, getting pre-orders, then we'll go and fulfill on it. And then we'll test with a very small group of people first, right? And then work out all the kinks, make sure everyone's happy, get some case studies. Then we'll do a public launch, and we'll use all the case studies from our pilot customers to basically let people know, de-risk it for our customers, and let people know, hey, we just threw 100 people in this new product. Here's the results they got. You can get these too.
Do you remember a product or a business that you may have started before that kind of just tanked on you, that you thought was actually going to be profitable?
That tanked on me. I haven't had any really like tank, but it's usually like you just get a few sales. You know, like years ago, I came up with an education product, and like I spent all this time and effort. But actually, again, I actually didn't spend too much time and effort. It was going to be an education course. I just recorded some Zoom calls with someone. We took those Zoom calls and used that because, again, I'm trying to test to see what the demand is first. I didn't have a big brand back then, so my first training course, we did the first webinar and we only sold like $2,000 on it. And then I was just like, okay, this is not worth my time. Yeah. Like, it's not worth my time to go and like really like professionally shoot all these videos and create a whole structured course around it. But there's a lot of like websites and stuff that like I looked at maybe buying and retrading that it's been like over 10 years now. But there's a lot of different products that test them. They don't take off. When you have product market fit, a lot of people think they have product market fit and they don't. Okay. What product market fit feels like is it feels like you're on a fucking train going down a mountain and the brakes are broken. Yeah. And even if you jump off that train, the train is still ripping. That's what real product market fit feels like. So if you don't have that feeling when you bring something to market, it doesn't feel like it's just taking off, then you don't really have true product market fit. And you just need to keep on iterating on what your product offering is until you do get that.
What if you're testing a product, but you feel like you're ahead of the trend? So like the market may not give you the value there, but you know you have something, or is that something like the market is always going to give you the answer no matter what?
The market is always true. You can't re-educate. It's too expensive to re-educate the market. Mm-hmm. So that if the market rejects it, the market rejects it. Now you could reposition it, right? Like when I was launching InvestorLift, a lot of my marketing initially was around like saving time. Mm-hmm. And like one of the guys that I talked to, he's like, dude, no, you're a data company. You want to reposition the product less around like increasing employee productivity and more around like the data and insights you can get to boost revenue. So I like exact same product, just repositioned it a little bit, repositioned the market, and all of a sudden, boom, it's doing 10x sales.
Is there a certain time frame that you aim for, like 3 months testing the product, 6 months, or a certain margin that you're aiming for to understand? Or is it just like it has to take off and that's when you know?
I'll usually, what you want to do is like, when you're launching anything, there's going to be a list of assumptions that you're making. So you need to identify what all those assumptions are. Like, one of my assumptions might be that I could run Facebook ads and acquire a customer for $25. Okay, well, we need to de-risk that assumption. We need to run Facebook ads and see what the actual cost is. So when you're testing stuff, you just make a list of your assumptions. Think about which of those assumptions are going to be the biggest drivers of whether or not this product is going to succeed or fail, and then de-risk each of those assumptions one by one by one. And that you should do that on anything, by the way. When you're doing a business partnership, when you're doing anything, any type of deal, like Warren Buffett, I learned this from Warren Buffett. He always says the way that Charlie and I have made so much money over the years is not thinking about what's going to go right, but think of all the different ways that it's going to go wrong. How does this get fucked up? And then go through all those different ways and try to de-risk all of them so that you have there's no other option but winning.
Yeah.
You spoke about time and like how you try to value it. Do you have a dollar value of what you think your time's worth?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
how much are you worth an hour, you would say?
$25,000 an hour.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. That's what I price it at. Because I know that if I spend an hour focusing on like really big stuff, then actually I probably value it a little bit higher than that, because I used to sometimes jump on calls we have a $35,000 product.
Yep.
And I actually don't do those anymore because my time value is too high. I probably value it probably around like $50,000 an hour, because if I do focus work on like, creating new subsidiaries or whatever, I can increase the enterprise value substantially.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are always asking me like, hey, can you do consulting? Or they're like, I'll pay you $100,000 if you come down for a weekend. I'm like, yeah, but if I also spent a weekend just like, recruiting like another killer for my team. Like I had a couple key hires this year that just like made me millions of dollars. The reel you were referring to earlier with Richard Branson, I met him a few years ago. Then I said, hey, Richard, you haven't just built $1 billion company, but $1 billion company after $1 billion company after $1 billion company. What is the secret? How do you hit success over and over again? I said, Robert, your job as a CEO is to do 3 things and 3 things only. Number 1, craft the vision for the company, right? Make it crystal clear. Who are we? What are we bringing to market? What are our core values? All of that. It needs to be crystal clear. I used to actually even create fake newspaper articles, post-dated, about like our company being sold for hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow.
And like with the New York Times and everything, and like post-date it like with a future date and like drop that on the team Slack. I do stuff like that to make the vision crystal clear. Number 2, find the best goddamn people in the world to go execute on that vision. So that's what I'm starting to do a lot of right now, is like finding those people. And then when they come in, like making sure that they have all the resources to do their job. But that leads into number 3, which is give those people the resources to do their job and then get the hell out of the way.
Yeah. What is your process when you're onboarding somebody that you actually want to work with?
Like if I'm hiring a key player, what I like to do, so first of all, I don't think you can figure out whether or not someone's a top player through an interview. And there's tons of stats around that, right? So I like to look for people that have a track record of success. And then I like to put them through the airplane test. I learned this from the consulting companies. They have this in their interviews. Like, would you be willing to sit beside this person on an airplane for 8 hours? Okay. And so what I'll do is a lot of times when people are coming, when I'm recruiting someone, they don't even know they're being recruited. Like I'll just be like, hey, fly out and come hang out with me for a weekend. Right. So I've done that with a lot of our key hires, is I fly them out to like hang out for a little bit. And then if we're not vibing, then okay, no, this is not going to work. But if you spend a couple days with someone, you'll figure out pretty quick, do you vibe with this person? Do they pass that airplane test? And then if they're a good fit, then I'll be like, oh, by the way, I've actually been incognito thinking about hiring you.
Yeah.
I think you should come join InvestorLift. And I find that that's a good way to recruit people. And then when they come on, I just like a monkey see, monkey do is a pretty effective way to onboard people. So I'll have them like shadow me, shadow other people on the team, and just like try to like get an overview knowledge of everything. And then throw them in, give them some KPIs. Every person that comes on also comes on usually for a trial basis. So it's usually like, hey, we're going to do a 3-month contract to see if this is a good fit for you and if we're a good fit for each other. Here's the KPIs you want to hit. And then we run the company like a professional sports team. Every single person needs to be the best in the world at that one thing that they do. Then we're all relying on each other to be the best in the world at their job. And if they're not the best in the world at that one job and they're not hitting their KPIs, then they have to go. Right? It's like, if we're talking to him, like if you're on the soccer field and your offense is, or since we're all Canadians here, if you're playing a hockey game, and you're the Calgary Flames and you're playing the Edmonton Oilers and you've gone out and you've scored 5 goals, but the goalie has let 6 pucks in. Sorry, the goalie's got to go. Now, they can have a bad game. Everyone's going to have a bad game. If every time someone had a bad game on this team, we chopped their heads off, we wouldn't have a team left. So you can have a bad game, but you can't have a bad season. If you have a bad season, you're out.
Yeah.
So everyone knows their numbers. They own their numbers. And if they're not performing their numbers, then there's zero emotion. It's just, hey, sorry, you got to go. And then when you do that, what happens is you build very strong team loyalty because people trust that you're going to have the best people in the world working with them. And everyone really wants to work with other people that are the best in the world. So we've only ever had one person ever quit our company. And that was because they got into med school. And that was always the plan. They were going to work with us part-time while they're in pre-med, hoping to get in med school. And so we give them a round of applause. Congrats on getting in med school. Call us when you're done. You can be the team doctor.
That's awesome.
There you go. Yeah.
So the little kid growing up in Calgary, like when you think back in the day, would that little kid be proud of the man you are today?
Absolutely. If I could go back in time, I would just go and be like, yo, don't worry, it's going to work out.
Yeah.
It's going to work out.
And I always ask that because I always find like the little kid version of us is like the true us. You know what I mean? Like, for example, like my mom, when I was young, she was like, I dropped you off at your aunt's house. She was babysitting you. And you were such a good boy, but you just talk too much. You know what I mean? So then it's kind of funny because like here we are 100 and something episodes in talking to people, right? So it's like, that's why I love to ask that question because I feel like that's just, for some reason, like it's the most genuine you.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to let, you don't want to change yourself, right? A lot of people try to like change themselves. Try to figure out who the authentic you is and based on your skills and what you like doing, where can you focus those things to be the best in the world at something, right? If you want to get to 11 out of 10, the only way to get to 11 out of 10 is you got to love what you're doing. And you got to have some natural skills that you're like born with that give you a unique edge, right? If we're both competing against each other and you hate what you're doing, but I love what I'm doing, guess what? I'm working nights and weekends. You're like, fuck off. I want to get out of the office. Like, but I'm like, oh, this is fun. Like, oh, I get to come in on Saturday and like, go build the next thing. So you got to find what you're good at. And usually what you're good at is what you love doing or what you naturally have some skills and talents at. So, those talents will come through like in your teen years. Yeah, I was always like a builder. I loved building stuff. And that kind of translated over. I was making websites when I was like 14, 15 years old. Now I run a software company, So yeah, look at what what do you naturally gravitate towards when you don't have to do anything else?
Yeah.
And try to like see how you could align those with some, different business ideas.
What's a quality within yourself that you've had to change drastically to get to where you're at now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm very ADD, and ADD, you have the tendency to start stuff and then not finish it and bounce around from one thing to another thing. So focus is the most important thing. If you take any business idea, it could be creating a glassware company, whatever, it doesn't matter. If you pick one thing and you just try to become the best in the world, and you focus on that one thing and don't chase shiny objects, over time you will be successful. If you just focus on one thing and just go after it every single day. So I try not to have shiny object syndrome and try to focus as much as I can on a few very small things. But that's definitely something I struggled with. I would overcommit when I was younger. Like when I was in high school, I was like in all the different bands. I was the school photographer. I was on the leadership team. I was so overcommitted on everything. And then I started doing the same thing when I was in college. And then partway through college, I was like, I should just cut everything and really focus on what matters the most. Even with communications, I used to try to respond to all my text messages and calls. And Alex Hormozy, he taught me this. I was talking about a conference that we were both speaking at backstage. And I said, Alex, I'm getting blown up all the time. Like, I have all these inbound text messages coming all the time. I'm trying to respond to them all, but then you respond and the conversation starts. And what I found is I wouldn't finish responding until like 2 a.m. in the morning every night. And then the next day I'm exhausted, I'm tired, and I can't go achieve the stuff that I need to. And it's just constant interruptions from people messaging all the time. So Alex asked me this. He's like, Robert, he's like, how many do you get? I'm like, I don't know, sometimes up to like 500 inbound messages per day. He's like, okay, if you had 5 million coming in per day, would you feel bad about not responding? I'm like, no, because it would be impossible. He's like, well, responding to 500 is impossible too. So I have cleared out my messages the other day. I have almost 1,274 missed calls.
Jeez.
I don't try to respond anymore. I just gave up on responding. And I just tell people that. I'm just like, hey, by the way, I don't respond. I'll call you if we need to do something. And the people that do really need to get a hold of me, if they really need to get a hold of me, they'll find a way to get a hold of me through my team or through someone else, and they'll get escalated to me. So when I stopped trying to respond to everyone, you know what happened? I was able to serve people a lot better. Because instead of just responding to people's text messages all the time, I'm now able to focus on the business. And then by me focusing on the business, I'm able to serve all the customers much better. Mm-hmm. So letting go of things, you got to say no to 99%. So you can, because every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So you say no to 99% so you can say yes to the 1% that really actually matters.
Aside from business, what are some things you like to do on your spare time? Like, are you a sports guy?
Yeah, good question. I'm trying to get my pilot's license done. I'm
really?
Wow, halfway through.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, the airport's right here.
The airport's right here, so I have no excuse now. So, my great grandfather was a pilot. My grandfather was a pilot. I'm paying for my dad to do his flight school now, and so if I get mine, then I'll be 4th generation.
Wow.
And then if my son becomes a pilot, then he'll probably be one of the first 5th generation pilots in history.
Really?
Yeah, because I mean, how many people were flying airplanes in the 1920s?
Yeah, that's true. That is
wow,
very true.
Very true.
So it might be one of the first ever.
That'd be incredible.
Yeah, working on doing that. And then here's a pro hack for work-life balance. First of all, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're getting started, there is no work-life balance. Okay, the whole work-life balance, that's bullshit. But how to stay sane? Here's how to stay sane. What I try to do is adventure Saturdays and lazy Sundays. So Saturdays, get out in nature, go hiking, mountain biking, skiing, whatever. Get out in nature. Just get yourself really tired. Get some sunshine, get some vitamin D. Like Saturdays are for going out, having an adventure. And then Sundays, complete opposite. Wake up at 11 o'clock, order Uber Eats, binge watch a Netflix show all day long. Just completely veg out, completely reset. Because then what happens is Monday, you're fully recovered, you're sharp, you're ready to crush the day. So that's a pro little hack that I figured out. It's like adventure Saturdays, lazy Sundays.
I love that. And I love how honest it is because like you always see these people online saying you got to work 7 days. Like you said, when you're building it, you have to. But when you're in a stage like that, it like the importance of you just like being able to go out for a hike, like that does so much for your conscience. You know what I mean? And then resetting on the Sunday, I can't even imagine like how ready you are for Monday.
Yeah, literally take over. Do you do traveling a lot? Is that something that you find that helps you like rejuvenate yourself and kind of get a better like idea of culture and stuff like that?
Yeah. I grew up in Africa. I've lived in Asia. I've lived in a bunch of different cities in Canada. Lived in Montreal for a bit. Lived all over the U.S. I love trying new cities, exploring different cultures. Last year I did over 100 flights. But over 100 flights in a year, that's really tough. That's a flight every 3 days. So I got really tired of traveling. So I've been trying not to travel. This year, people are always, oh, you come speak at my conference. If I can't fly there on JSX, I'm not flying. Do you guys know what JSX is?
No.
JSX, so it's a private jet where you can rent a seat on the jet. So they have JSX right here at the airport right here. So there's no security or anything. You just walk on, you just jump right on the jet, flies you where you got to go. There's no TSA. I just dropped off Scotty there a couple hours ago. You know, I dropped him off 15 minutes before wheels up.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah. They don't have that in Canada yet, but
Not at all. That's the one thing. It seems so much stressful over there.
Seems like Canada's just behind everything. Like I told this guy, like when we went to this event, like the Americans are just different. Like it's go, go, go. Like Canada, I feel like it's a little slow motion.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So my brother actually was the first one in our family to start a tech company. He started before me and before my brother-in-law, and he kept it in Canada. It's been struggling. And I've told him for years, I'm like, you got to bring it to the States. You got to bring it to the States because it's 10 times bigger addressable market. But he kept it in Canada. Conversely, my brother-in-law, his company, as soon as it started taking off, he set up in the US. And now his company's worth billions of dollars. I started mine in the US, been building in the US. I could not do what I do in the US in Canada. It would have been impossible. Not to get political, but Trudeau screwed up that country so badly. Like,
Horrible.
Yeah, we're on board with you on that one.
yeah, hopefully they can fix it, but it's not a business-friendly environment. If you have an anti-business environment on top of having a small market, it's very hard to retain top talent. So you get brain drain from the country. Europe has this problem too. You know, my fiance is Norwegian. I was telling her, you know, I went to school with a lot of Norwegians. None of them went back to Norway after college. They all stay in the US. I'll stay in the US because you can't actually start a startup in Norway. They've made that country so anti-competitive. There are no tech startups in Norway. They don't exist. And they have all the oil money from the Norwegian sovereign wealth fund that's kind of masking the problems. But if they didn't have the oil money, like that country would be in big trouble. A lot of countries have been in really big trouble. The U.S. is starting to go down that route too. It's becoming, a little bit less business friendly, but hopefully we can get back to meritocracy. Meritocracy is really what made America great. If you don't have meritocracy, the alternative is nepotism and oligarchy. You're going to have one or you're going to have the other, right? We've seen a lot of that happen in Canada, but hopefully Pierre Poilievre comes in and fixes that shit.
Becomes the savior of Canada, hopefully, right?
Yeah. I've thought about coming back and actually in the future running for prime minister.
Really?
Man, you should, honestly.
Yeah. I did a double minor with political science as secondary minor, and I spent 3 summers in Montreal to learn French.
Yeah.
Specifically so in the future, if I ever did want
That's awesome.
to run for prime minister, I could. Actually, my grandfather, who was it? Prime minister in like the 70s. What was his name? But one of the prime ministers, actually, he was my grandfather's neighbor and born in Saskatchewan. And he would work on my grandfather's farm, helping out all the time. And their family didn't have a lot of money, but my grandfather was actually my great grandfather, Thomas Wensley. Actually, my son's named after him. He recognized that this guy had a lot of talent. So he lent him money for law school, got him through law school, and then he became prime minister. Let me just look it up.
Yeah.
I'm going to look up his name. One sec.
It's kind of insane to think how big players like that, and they're literally your next door neighbor or somebody that's just right beside you.
Yeah. Oh, I would 100%.
Yo, I would, yeah, 100%. We'll campaign for
Yeah,
that,
we'll
right?
campaign.
Let me look up this guy's name.
Yeah.
John Diefenbaker.
Okay.
Yeah, so my great grandfather paid for John Diefenbaker's law school.
That's crazy.
And it was like, you need to run for Prime Minister of Canada. And then sure enough, he got elected, became Prime Minister.
So is that like a goal of yours to?
Well, again, like the question is, do I do politics in the US or do I do it in Canada? I'll probably do it like
At some point.
after I sell the companies.
Mhm.
But the question is, do I go back to Canada, run for Prime Minister, which I know I could win, or do I? You're hearing about it first publicly. Let's see how this podcast ages.
We got the job.
Or do it in the U.S., and or do it in the United States, and do governor or something like that.
That seems like a not scary, but like a tough position to wanna lead a country,
100%.
right? Like what makes you want to put that responsibility on your shoulders?
Oh, it's like if sometimes it's just like like if I didn't build InvestorLift, then who else would?
Yeah. Same mentality.
Like I got the best people in the world. Like if we don't build this stuff, no one else will. Like if we don't fix it, if Pierre Poilievre comes in and he fixes it, then I'm like, okay, Canada's so hopefully it comes in and he fixes Canada. But the US needs some fixing too.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be like, where do we get the most leverage?
Do you have a timeline on like when you would actually like make that jump?
Yeah, so I'll probably sell here in the next couple of years, and then maybe like 5 years from now or so, I'll be in my late 30s. I think that's a good age
That's awesome.
to jump in.
I would love that. That'd be incredible to
literally, it'd be
see
cool.
you go take over either the States or Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because there's only one Canadian prime minister that went to Harvard. Every time I go to the Harvard Club in New York City, there's 400 rooms. Every time I go and visit there, and I book a room, I always get that one room. Who is that? I'm trying to remember which prime minister went to Harvard. I can't remember his name. Anyways, yeah, we always get that one room. I'm like, is this like a sign from the gods?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like Zuckerberg's room and now like his room. It's like
right?
it's kind of weird how the world works.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's fun. But I love Canada. Canada, such a beautiful country. There's so many natural resources, such good people. The fact that it's doing as well as it is doing, I think, is because of the people. There's really bad leadership, but you have really good people. And I think that's what's like keeping the country afloat right now is just good people that are just working hard every day, keeping the country going.
100%.
Oh, no, that was awesome, man. Like it's just crazy that you even have like these big aspirations, right? Because a lot of people, like as successful as you are in what you're doing, everybody's kind of like, okay, I'll just do that. But you just have more and more that you keep like speaking about and actually thinking about.
Well, it's kind of like Trump, right? Like everyone says, why don't you just fuck off in the country and just like relax? You have all the money in the world. And he's like, no, like I want to do this for the country, right? So it's one of those things too, where like once you sell the company, I'm sure you could do the same thing, but you still want to lead. So, yeah, like what, like, have you always been a natural leader? Is that always something that has been within you?
I didn't really notice it, but I will tell you one story. I remember when I was in the 7th grade, in Canada, we have outdoor education.
Yeah.
So in outdoor education class, one time, the teacher takes us outside and there's this like backpack tied up in a tree, like way super high. And he's like, all right. And then there's like 3 different teams. He's like, oh, we're going to break you up into teams and let's see how fast you guys can get the bag down. And then afterwards, he brought us into class. He's like, so what I didn't tell you guys is this is actually a leadership test. And he's like, good job, Robert. Taking leadership.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sitting there. I'm just like, you guys all have really dumb ideas. And you don't say that out loud. But I'm like, okay, here's how we're actually going to get it down. So I guess maybe, yeah. I think just growing up with a lot of siblings helps you because it's always like, you gotta, if you're not loud and you don't say what you want, you're not going to get it.
Yeah.
So
especially being the third child.
Yeah,
right? It's
exactly.
tough.
So I think you naturally have to build some leadership skills. So I know Josh is probably here.
Yeah,
I
no,
want to
no
see if
worries.
we can get you some time with him.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like we'll wrap this up. I guess, is there any pieces of advice you'd like to give our audience, like 1 or 2 pieces of advice for young entrepreneurs who just want to take over? Like, what would you say is your 2 pieces of advice?
Yeah. So don't go for the money. Instead, don't try to make $1 million. Try to become the person that makes $1 million. Okay. If you do that, you will get the money. Focus on value. And where can you add the most value? What are you uniquely most talented at? What do you have a competitive advantage in that you can bring to the world to become the number one at one thing? And then niche down. That one thing could be like a very small thing, right? It could be a very small micro niche, but try to become the best in the world. Go 11 out of 10, stay extremely focused on whatever it is that you're uniquely qualified to become the best in the world at. And then just go all in, 11 out of 10 every single day. After that, go relentlessly. And remember, you don't fail until you quit. You don't fail until you quit. And there's a lot of guys that quit right before they would have made it really big. So once you find what that one thing is, just go all in on it.
Yeah, you guys got spoiled today. Yeah, and honestly, Robert, thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us. Like, we don't have the $50,000 to pay for the hour, but honestly, we really appreciate the time and the hospitality. It's been great. And for you guys watching, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. You guys have been spoiled. This has been an amazing episode, and you'll see us next week. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate you. All right, peace.